Well, with Destiny 2 seeming to be coming to an end, I and a lot of people are quite frankly not done with the franchise. There are a lot of people who want to see more from Destiny, from Bungie, from Sony. I don't know if we're ever going to get that, to be frank with you. But what I do know is that Bungie has managed to give us 10 years of Destiny so far. In that 10 years, we have multiple campaigns, stories, eras of the game, updates, seasons, DLCs, expansions, gameplay systems, weapons, armor, improvements, changes, etc., etc. They've given us a lot in the last 10 years. Now, my main thing on this channel when I talk about Destiny is looking at what they've done, have not done, and trying to offer, my thoughts as to what would make this franchise have more sticking power, easier onboarding for new players, more robust systems that incentivize players to play the game for longer periods of time. That's what I like to do. I'm not an expert, but I am somebody who loves Destiny and wishes that I could play it more than I'm able to. Now, there are other games and studios out there who do certain things correctly when it comes to these types of games. Some of those differences that these studios make give those games more sticking power, get players to invest in them longer than we're able to invest in Destiny, and overall make for, in some cases, better games. The world of Destiny, the gameplay that it has, the story, it captivated myself in 2013, 2014, as I had never played a game like that before. I think that's what a lot of people who got into Destiny kind of had in common. It was unique at the time, felt amazing to play. That one point about how good the game felt to play was probably 60 to 80% of what pushed the game to last as long as it has. The other 20 to 40% of the game, the progression, the new player onboarding, the investment opportunities available to the player, those are all the things that I wanted to see improved. Now, there are other games out there that do those systems, progression, investment, new player onboarding. They do them better than Destiny ever has. That's why it was always frustrating and why I was always so passionate to make content and try to see it done the correct way in other areas of the industry, and wishing that Bungie would take learnings from those other games, from those other studios, and put them into Destiny and see what would happen. I think that would have been great, and I still think that it can be. Now, the last video that I came out with essentially was me crucifying Bungie on the lack of innovation and the decisions to move forward with Marathon over Destiny. Now, as we've come to learn over the last week, if you've paid any attention to online stuff around the game, it seems that Bungie might have actually wanted to do just that. Now, according to reports from Paul Tassi and Joseph Schreier, Destiny 3, Destiny Project Payback were active projects that were in development or in early development and concepting at Bungie during the Witch Queen to Lightfall era of Destiny 2. And this was around 2022, 2023, approximately. But it would seem that despite Bungie wanting to start those projects and pitching those ideas, Sony told them no. Now, all the griping and the bitching that I've done and the Destiny community has done over the decision to not move forward with Destiny 3, instead continue working on Destiny 2, moving to working on Marathon, may have all been directed at the wrong people. I always wondered why the talent in Bungie started to leave in the years after the Sony acquisition, and to me, after learning everything we have, this is what I believe probably happened, and it's all, again, speculation. Initially, Bungie was pushed by the executives. Pete Parsons is the name that most people decide to point the finger at, to Sony as this Goliath expert in live service gaming. That was what Bungie was at the time. Now, also at the time, Microsoft was absorbing massive studios such as Bethesda, Activision Blizzard, and others. Sony, needing to get something under their belt that kept them competitive against Microsoft, Bethesda and Activision were two huge industry names. Here comes Pete Parsons, the head of Bungie at the time, selling to Sony that Bungie would be a massive investment, but it would be a worthy investment. Look at Destiny, who has managed to live for 10 years at the time and watched so many competitors come and go in the industry that couldn't hold a candle to Destiny, quite frankly, such as The Division, You could also kind of lump other games like Outriders and Borderlands into that genre as well. They had released multiple titles in some cases in those games, and none of them had seeming to come close to what Destiny was able to achieve and stay making as much money as Destiny did for as long as it did. Here's all these other projects that Bungie was also incubating at the time that when they arrive are going to make as big of an impact as Destiny did. This is what Pete and the C-suite executives at Bungie were telling Sony in 2021, 2022. Sony said, okay, you know what? Microsoft just bought Activision and they bought Bethesda. We need something under our belt. Pete, the pitch looks good. Here's a check for $3.6 billion. Let's bring Bungie in so that we can absorb some of that revenue that Destiny's making. I'm sure Sony was not going to bat an eye of that. And also use the expertise that Bungie was going to offer for other live service titles that Sony was looking to launch. Now, in the years that followed the acquisition, again, we're at the Witch Queen, Lightfall, Final Shape era of Destiny 2. We had about 3 years of content that was roughly left for Destiny 2. Bungie started to push for what was next in the Destiny franchise, while those other projects were still being worked on at Bungie, such as Marathon, Matter, other titles that we've only heard in rumor. Now, Mark Noseworthy and Luke Smith, who were at the helm, from my understanding of Destiny, they were kind of the ones that, you know, were working on what was coming next. Destiny 3 Payback. These are the heads of Destiny, essentially needing to pitch what was going to come after these last few years of content for D2. In the pitches that these guys made to Sony, letting them know this is where Bungie wanted to invest time and resources and effort in the future over the next years, potentially another decade of content for Destiny, it was determined that it would be too expensive by Sony, and no such projects were greenlit for concepting, pre-production, none of that during Witch Queen, Lightfall, Final Shape. Mark and Luke, the two guys who had been at the helm of Destiny since the earliest days of its inception and its production at Bungie, were pretty much just told that their baby has no future investment opportunities in Sony's opinion, who now owns Bungie as well as the Destiny IP. Now, Mark and Luke, I would imagine, come back to Sony multiple times over the last couple of years with Destiny 2, all the way up until the last expansion, the Final Shape. Now, Luke Smith came on record and actually told us, you know, a couple of weeks before the Final Shape, that this was not the end of Destiny. Many people thought that, including myself, it would mean something would be coming after Destiny 2. It wouldn't be the last expansion. It's not the end, there's more to come. That's the communication we were getting from them literally up until the month of the final expansion. We get to the final expansion, the Final Shape. Apparently in the background, Bungie just still did not have a green light from Sony to move forward with anything next in Destiny. Not Destiny 3, not Destiny Payback, no production green light for anything. The talent that Sony had written such a large check to maintain and keep at Bungie and continue to work on Bungie projects started to leave. Luke and Mark left, and we learned about this during the Final Shape when it was actually released. I want to say it was in the weeks that followed the Final Shape's released, we learned that they had left. I would imagine that after a decade of building something like Destiny, and then to be told again and again and again in the last few years of Destiny 2 that there was nothing more that Sony was going to let them do with that IP to keep it alive, other than keep working on Destiny 2, all the way up until the last expansion for it, they kept being told this, was demoralizing, and probably the last straw for those two guys. Other developers at Bungie who saw the lack of investment that Sony was willing to give into Destiny transitioned to work on Marathon, or probably tried to transition to work on Marathon, seeing that it was the next project that Bungie was going to try to get off the ground and have a big impact. For anyone who couldn't keep working on Destiny 2, they had to keep Destiny 2 alive for as long as possible. That kind of became the goal. Hence, we got the Fate Saga, which was the series of expansions Bungie told us would come after the Final Shape. Now, these expansions and the many of the gameplay changes that came in them were received poorly. As was clear, Bungie was having to shift resources around to support Marathon and other projects. Many of the key talent at Bungie who saw there was no future for Destiny, at least right now, left. Now, I think that hearing everything that happened, Bungie realizing that D2 was never going to be a big of a hit as it needed to be, this is when things just kind of started to fall apart. They started to move, less resources to Destiny, smaller expansions, smaller content for the game. All that did in turn was have the core audience who did stay behind, who did want more Destiny after the final shape, to point the finger at Bungie for deciding to not make Destiny 3 or to keep making things for Destiny 2 when pretty much everybody was done with it. They wanted to move on instead of something new to something better. And what we didn't know after all this time is that Bungie was pretty much told they could not do that. Bungie was probably told if they wanted to keep investing into Destiny as a franchise, it had to be in D2. Anything after D2 would be too expensive, so they had to work and try to keep it alive in Destiny 2. And the entire gaming community, D2 was done after the final shape. Everybody collectively agreed, thank you for Destiny 2, it was a rough ride, let's move on to Destiny 3 or what's next. But it may have been the case that Sony was forcing them into a position where if people wanted more Destiny, it had to exist in D2, or Bungie had to be making Marathon. Seems to be what might have been the case. Again, this is all speculation. This is what I believe probably happened. This makes the most sense to me after everything we've learned. That the developers at Bungie, who had merely been working their ass off on content for Destiny 2 and Marathon, I thank you for that. I think most of the community does as well. Even as much as we bitch and gripe and complain about both games, I think after all this time, I'm starting to realize, and maybe the community is as well, that the developers at Bungie probably agreed with a lot of the gripes and complaints that the community had, but the large sweeping changes that the game would need to have those problems addressed was something that needed to happen with Destiny 3 or a new title. Trying to put these large sweeping changes into Destiny 2 would require resources, and those are resources that Destiny didn't have devoted to it at Bungie. So instead, we probably got versions of these types of systems and big gameplay changes that we would have originally gotten like a D3. We got them instead in D2. We got Portal. We had light level progression and resets of those light levels per seasons. We had tiered loot, set bonuses. These all could have been things that you could have seen come with a Destiny 3 title, and all of them could have been getting much more work put into them to where Portal was actually good, to where the light level progression and the resets were actually good. The tiered loot and set bonuses, this could have all been stuff that got many more years of work on it to make it more awesome. All of these things could have been part of a new title, but instead Bungie was told, if you're going to innovate and try to make Destiny a better game, it has to be done from the frame of Destiny 2. And it simply didn't work. It simply was not meant to work in the Destiny 2 ecosystem. It was an impossible task for them to be doing it. Many of these systems exist to some degree in other games, but putting them into the D2 ecosystem, that was what ultimately, I think, killed the game. Now we get to today. The investment that Bungie wanted to put into another Destiny title, they attempted to put into Destiny 2, didn't work, had the opposite effect, I think, because again, Destiny 2 has just had so much baggage and years of decisions, good or bad, that, had all kinds of shakeups. Anything you try to put in D2 was ultimately going to be mixed reviews, probably fail, or it wouldn't be implemented as good as you could implement it if it was in like a D3. Bungie and Sony doubling down on Marathon, but when I say doubling down, understand that Bungie's probably going to get about half of its workforce axed. So really probably the same, maybe a little bit more investment and development work behind Marathon. It's an okay game, but it's not a game that's going to convince Sony or Microsoft to write another $3 billion check for it. That was Destiny that did that. It all circles back to the decisions that were made at the highest level. Bungie being pitched as a live service wizard to Sony by Pete Parsons and the execs at Bungie. A talent that was at Bungie wanted to move onto a new Destiny project. They probably had it in the right that they understood Destiny 2 had a lot of baggage with it, and these big sweeping changes to make another version of Destiny that people wanted needed to be in D3. Multiple years in the D2 tank they had left, so they wanted to start that work now, which would have been back then in 22, 23. And Bungie telling Sony, this is our plans. This is what the cost of working on the next era of Destiny is going to look like. All this is all the work we're going to put into this project. Here's what we're going to do. Sony essentially telling them no, over and over again, potentially for the last couple of years, to the creative minds that were there during the inception of Bungie, mind you. They were telling no. The decisions and the investment that Bungie was going to be putting into the next Destiny game were instead probably repurposed, and all of that development work was instead directed to try to keep Destiny alive through Destiny 2. The Destiny 2 last expansion hit, the community was ready for the next Destiny, and at the call of Sony, Destiny 2 had to be kept alive. That was where, if Bungie was going to invest in the franchise, it had to be at. Key talent, seeing that this was a terrible call for the future of the IP, started to leave the studio. Quality of Destiny starts to fall as it becomes apparent that D2 is never going to succeed like it needs to after the final shape. Marathon comes out, makes an okay splash, but then quickly gets drowned by problems with the game, high barrier to entry, the extraction shooter genre just in general. It's very niche. The lack of investment opportunities that Destiny was so well known for, those don't exist in Marathon. Sony deciding, hey, all the work that we've told you guys that you wanted to keep doing for Destiny, and we told you it had to be done in Destiny 2, we're going to go ahead and stop that. Done and over. We've come out and told the world that Sony is supporting Bungie and supporting Marathon, despite its current conditions, its current problems. We're going to back you guys. But in order for us to do that, Destiny needs to be done after June. It is pretty much the position that Bungie's been put into. And with that, we're caught up. I don't want to stop making Destiny content, quite frankly. I don't plan on it, even though we're not going to be getting anything after June. With that June 9th update, it does sound like there's going to be quite a lot of changes to Destiny 2 in its current form. I would expect many of the systems and changes that are going to be put into the game are going to enable players to just kind of get in, have fun, not worry too much about some of the things we've had to worry about in the past. There is a little bit of new content, like the Pantheon, the Sparrow Racing League, even though it's kind of a meme. There are some changes to the portal. All of the raids and dungeons being updated to have current loot and set is actually a very nice thing. It's going to be, in my opinion, how the Destiny 2 Edge of Fate saga should have launched when we got the portal, when we got all these systems. And, you know, there may have been a time where the next big release for Destiny had all this stuff and it was much, much better. People loved it. If they had more resources to give to Destiny, if we could have got a D3, maybe that's how we would have got all these new systems. But at the end of the day, there are no games out there like Destiny. Division and Division 2 have never had the same amount of success as Destiny 1 or Destiny 2 had. And despite that, Ubisoft is committed to D3. Division 2 has got seasonal updates for years and support from their dev studio for years. Very small studio still supporting Division, albeit they're much smaller than Destiny. It goes to show that even a small team left behind to support the game could be enough potentially to keep it alive for a long time, much longer than people think. Maybe even enough to convince the heads at the studio that Division 3 or Destiny 3 could be something that's worth revisiting as an investment opportunity. But hey, we'll see what happens. As of right now, it sounds like nobody at Bungie is being left behind for D2. That's my speech for the day. I plan on having some more content coming out over the next couple of days in June and July as we look back on Destiny 2, look back on Destiny 1. You know, I don't expect the Destiny community to go out quietly, so I figure I can get my piece in there as well. See if anybody important watches any of these community videos and sees that there's an audience, a massive audience, for Destiny to continue.